Hi, everyone. Harry here to talk about what I think is the most outrageous thing going on in the country and probably the most outrageous thing since Trump took office in January. We're seeing it play out in Southern California, the most recent being this widespread raid by ICE officials, by ICE battalions, armies of places where they think they might find deportable aliens. And it's police state stuff and worse. So they come in by the dozens. They're wielding batons. They're screaming at people. They're threatening people. They're grabbing people indiscriminately, including U.S. citizens, including one U.S. citizen whom they know, actual disabled veteran, is a U.S. citizen that has just been disappeared and not returned. It's the worst police state we've seen, and it's just harrowing and kind of revolting to see that it's happening in our country. Okay, so that sort of sets it up. And as I say, we've seen some of it on TV, but we now have an opinion by a district court judge that has granted the application for a temporary restraining order, and basically order to show cause regarding preliminary injunction. Means that preliminary injunction hasn't been entered yet, but she's made it clear that it is really coming. And Judge Frimpong, the judge in LA, has made it pretty clear that it's coming. And man, oh man, it can't come soon enough given the facts that she has found. And they're certainly consistent with everything we are seeing. So you can frame this in two basic legal buckets, both of which are just egregious, outrageous violations for U.S. law enforcement, and each of which has led to a separate basis for preliminary injunction. The first is the detentions and arrest. ICE is coming in. And with, you see like Tom Homan on TV beating his chest and saying, we don't need probable cause, etc. We can just make what the law knows as a Terry stop, a quick question that the person can just refuse, and request for maybe ID, whatever. But you can only do that with so-called reasonable suspicion. Now, to make an arrest, as you may know, you need probable cause. So they have to be here having probable cause, more likely than not, that the person they're arresting has committed, in their case, the crime of being present without proper papers. And even to stop them, the thing that they're touting on TV, and ask a question, they need to have reasonable, articulable suspicion. And here is where the whole thing folds like a house of cards. They are going in and they are basically choosing whomever they want. And what is this sort of totality of the circumstances, reasonable suspicion? It is precisely factors that are not permitted, both because they are rank racial discrimination and because under the law, they apply broadly. You can't say my basis for articulable suspicion is this guy was wearing blue jeans. And even less can you say, and this is what they're trying to say, well, they speak Spanish, or they looked afraid, or they looked Mexican. And that's what they're using, but those are factors that apply broadly, right? They go into this big, I think this was a cannabis farm, and there's a lot of workers there. Some are American, some aren't, and they are not distinguished by whether they look Mexican. There's an instance in the findings where they go up to a guy and an American citizen, totally rough him up and say, "What hospital were you born in?" He says, "I don't know, but it was in East LA," and he is indeed a citizen. And based on that, they want to drag him away. Someone who is there working in this place, born in East LA and a U.S. citizen, doesn't provide any kind of articulable suspicion for ICE officers to go and arrest them, and much less, by the way, they make the claim, we have the right to just briefly detain and ask a question. By the way, these are administrative officers. They are not law enforcement officers. They basically have no more rights than a school crossing guard. They have the right, it's true, but not because they're some special bully boys. That's just how they pose themselves. But what they don't have the right to do, what no one has the right to do, what no police officer has the right to do, is what they're doing. And we have many instances of just, banging in cars and stopping people and roughing them up and arresting them, something you would clearly need probable cause. And even then you would be subject to a lawsuit for excessive force, or having the charges dismissed for excessive force, even if you had probable cause. But they have nowhere close. And we have really instance after instance of mass, nasty, swarming ICE agents just going into workplaces and absolutely, wreaking havoc like an invading army, which they really are, even though they're law enforcement and not supposed to act like an army. So I see the pictures, read the complaints. It is as bad as we've seen in this country, and this is our government representing and supposedly complying with our Constitution, and I mean right and left. It is a friggin' outrage. Okay, so let me now go to the judge's order, which says goes through all this and says, I am putting a stop to this for now and keeping them from coming in and making all these arrests or detention while they think about it. So it's a long, thorough opinion. And she goes through all the basic facts about what I've laid out for the arrests. And they are necessarily anecdotal, but they are absolutely hair-raising anecdotal. That is just half the case. The other half is illegalities in detention. And these are harrowing in their own right, but, in a different way than having a government bunch of marauders coming in and bang heads. They are putting them in these centers, small windowless rooms. You can't sit down because they're so cramped in some cases, deprived of food. Some haven't even been given water, deprived of the ability to communicate with counsel. All of these are basic rights for any detainee, including someone who's being detained on immigration charges, civil charges. So that's also a whole series of violations laid out in the complaint that the judge endorses and says, I am putting an end to this and ordering you not to do it. Now, this is just a whole series. Those are the two basic buckets. They actually cite several different federal provisions, the Constitution itself, access to counsel, warrantless arrest without probable cause of flight risk, and the like. But it's basically this. They're coming in, hammering, and totally abusing people with not even reasonable suspicion to make their quick stop, much less for the absolute kind of violence they're perpetrating. And then they're taking them and putting them in, hellholes with no basic rights. And by the way, they're doing this not simply to unlawful aliens or aliens who are subject to detention. We know of instances. There was this outrageous episode of a U.S. citizen, as it happens, a disabled American veteran who sees these agents coming in and starting to make trouble, he's in a car, puts it in reverse to go out of there, and they swarm him, stop the car, force it open, grab him, take him away, and for an entire weekend, nobody literally knew where he was. His wife was, distraught, his sister as well, trying to find him, and not a word from the U.S. government about this U.S. citizen that they had patently, illegally taken away. They had not even a scintilla reasonable suspicion, much less probable cause. And this guy was just disappeared and wasn't released. I think it just this morning that he was finally released from the detention that the ICE people had imposed, even though it's been all over the papers for a couple days. Who is this guy? Where is this guy? Etc. You know, that this can happen in the United States of America is completely nauseating. So the legal focus now is on what's happening to this class of people, and the judge has granted temporary relief. But just in general, it's part and parcel of a much larger kind of mindset and operation that is really the worst of the worst for what we've seen, the most inattentive and contemptuous of the Constitution, the most overbearing and nasty show of federal power, the most dystopian kind of image from a Mad Max type nightmare. And that's our government under the law enforcement agency that has just gotten an extra, I think it's $75 billion in the big, beautiful bill, so they can bulk up and be, even more widespread and abusive. Bad, 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 bad shit. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.